Hello and welcome to our December leader support session, Planning Safe Scouting. I am Brady. I am the Game Haven Council Program Director. I am really thrilled to have two awesome, safe, and wonderful leaders with me. Rob Wilkinson, who is our Health, Safety, and Logistics Chair at Game Haven Scout Camp, and Ronda Marshall, who is our NYLT Coordinator and our Assistant Scoutmaster with Troop 82. A couple of quick housekeeping things. If my mouse works. There we go. So if you have questions, put them in the chat. Please do remember we're being recorded. And chat conversations and etc. do get recorded as well. If you're not talking, please mute, or especially if you're going to have some background audio, it'll help save the bandwidth. Remember points 4, 5, and 6 of the Scout Law. And our next leader support session will be early February for the Council Fireside Chat. That final date is to be determined. We're looking at February 6th, but we are coordinating with a bunch of schedules of very busy people for that one. So we will not be doing something in January because I value my sanity. So our agenda tonight, we're going to have a safety moment. Then we're going to pass over to Mr. Rob Wilkinson. Then Mrs. Ronda Marshall, and with a bit of a Q&A, and then we'll all be on our merry way. So, our safety moment tonight is the Scouting America commitment to safety. I had the absolute pleasure this afternoon to be in a Zoom call with our National Scouts BSA program chair, whose name I am blanking on, but she is absolutely wonderful. And really, we were talking about ways to best support our Scouts BSA at camp, and she talked about making sure everyone understood and knows the Scouting America commitment to safety. This has been around for a while, and I admit that I haven't seen this in quite a while. So, quick safety moment, we're going to look at that commitment to safety. Scouting America is committed to creating a welcoming, safe environment where Scouts can freely express themselves, share their experiences, and become the best version of themselves, learning from and respecting each other. We welcome, at every level of our movement, youth and families who wish to live a life of impact and purpose, guided by the Scout Oath and Law. And that is it. It's 2 sentences, but it's a good thing to remember as we go about all of our stuff. I, as our guest presenters know, I'm always a big fan of mental emotional support, mental emotional and social health. Apologies. And it's important to remember that as Scouters, it's our job to support Scouts in safety more than just what we'll be talking about today, which is very important, but support their safety on a personal individual level, because that's really how we create future leaders. This has been your safety moment. And without further ado, Mr. Wilkinson, the floor is yours.
All right. Does everybody see something that says fun wrecking in front of them?
Off to a good start.
Okay, perfect. This is I'm not a Zoom guy, so I'm a Teams guy. So I'm hoping that this is going to be visible to everybody. But I'm Rob Wilkinson. I'm a den leader with PAC 82, and I'm also the Health, Safety, Logistics Chair at Game Haven Scout Camp. This is intended to give you all an overview of the safe scouting resources and the structure of that from Scouting America. So who can tell me, and you can just put this in the chat since you're all muted, I think, what's the greatest danger in the workplace? And seeing blanks will go to our multimedia portion of the presentation. And maybe we won't. There's what I perceive to be a funny video, and maybe Brady can look at it later and tell me maybe you should take that out of the presentation next time. But what's the greatest danger to Scouts? There's sort of, here's a list of prohibited activities: lawn darts, cannons, 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, dodgeball, tree climbing. To answer the first question, slips, trips, and falls are the greatest danger in an industrial setting. The greatest danger to Scouts are persons of trust. That video had a bunch of funny things like guys, getting their arms caught in machinery, and it's over the top kind of stuff, right? But the point being is that not exotic things, it's the commonplace things and things we're complacent about are actually the greatest danger in the scouting to scouts. Scouts are regularly losing BB guns, slingshot, bows, and arrows, and nobody's getting hurt. And that's an area where we really, as an organization, stress safety almost to a fault sometimes. And then maybe any other program area. This is a quote from Lord Baden-Powell, and I won't read the whole thing because you're all literate. But essentially, it says that there's no way to account for every eventuality, but somebody who carries the principles will be prepared in a moment of emergency. You can find the guide to safe scouting at this hyperlink, and I'm assuming that no one's going to carry around this video or PowerPoint, but you could just Google guide to safe scouting, and it's going to be one of your first hits. To go back to Baden-Powell's quote, there's no policy manual that's going to cover every eventuality. And the guide to safe scouting includes a list of prohibited activities, but just because something's not on that list doesn't mean it's approved. So all our activities need to serve the goals of scouting and fit within the safe scouting framework. Safe scouting means risk management. We can never completely eliminate risk. Risk can be mitigated, and risk may be acceptable to advance the aims and methods of scouting, the goals of scouting. All scouting should be safe. That means there's supervision, assessment, fitness and skill, equipment, and environment. All activities should be supervised. You should have adequate adult supervision from qualified and trustworthy adults. Is it reasonable to believe, ask yourself, is it reasonable to think that we will have done what we can to mitigate harm if scouts are adequately supervised? If maybe this is a bad example, but if a tree falls and crushes a scout, that might just be an act of nature. And absent clear cutting all getting in scout camp, we can never eliminate that risk. But it's like the fully loaded 747 falling from the sky. If that started happening, well, then we'd get our butts in a hurry. But the fact that that never happens ever means A, it's a bad example, but B, that's probably a fairly safe thing to do. Leaders should assess whether an activity meets the guidance standards if it's listed and that's not prohibited. Is this something that is A, explicitly prohibited? And even if not explicitly prohibited, does it fulfill the aims and methods of scouting or the goals of scouting? Fitness and skill. Is this something that the scouts and the scouters are fit or within their skill level? Is it reasonable to believe that the participants are healthy or skilled enough for that activity? And that's where I just touch on it briefly here, but the annual health and medical record. I think, and this is me editorializing somewhat, we as an organization, particularly by virtue of being in uniform and having some military roots way back, a century ago, I think that we often gravitate towards, well, we need to follow we're following the rules for the sake of following rules. And if you're in the organization for a long time, then the rules sort of get ingrained and you're not thinking about why we're doing it. And the AHMR is, okay, well, do we have it, does Game Haven Council actually need to know the exact date that John Q. Scout got their tetanus shot? Well, no, but we need to make sure they have their shots. And we also need to know if there's anything in there that would flag that we should consider accommodations or not do a particular activity because it's beyond the fitness and skill level of that scout or scouter. So this is a sliding scale depending on the circumstances. We don't let our lion cubs do a lot more things that venturers or older scouts or scouters can do. Equipment and environment. Make sure the equipment that's used is appropriate, it's appropriately sized, it should be safe. Leaders should regularly check on this gear. An activity might be generally safe, but unsafe under particular circumstances. If the troop canoe is dry rotted and is only moldy K-Pock life jackets, and cracked paddles, then canoeing is not inherently dangerous, but we've got a bunch of bad equipment that we haven't maintained, and the editorializing is we are not fulfilling the Scout motto, being prepared. For those of you, the Jerry's Barn at Game Haven Scout Camp is named for the late Jerry Jenkins, and he used to always say, something is the usual Scout hyperbole. And I don't want this to be the usual Scout hyperbole. We want scouting to be safe because we want scouting to flourish. Unsafe scouting leads to liabilities. Liabilities lead to damages, and damages are loss of resources for scouting, and damage to increases reputational risk, which is a whole nother conversation. But we want scouting to continue to be the program that we know and love, and part of that is scouting safely. A big part of that is scouting safely. Whenever there are incidents that result in breaches or go against safe scouting, they need to be reported. And that kind of falls into three categories. There's your acute things, immediate injury or medical emergency, injuries or illnesses that require medical attention beyond basic first aid, including near misses, and then a youth protection or membership infractions, known or suspected abuse behavior that put a youth at risk. And these are directly from, this is word for word from the Guide to Safe Scouting. If there's those acute things, immediate injury, medical emergency, report to contact 911 and report to the Scout executive. If there's an incident or a near miss incident, these are the things where somebody's hurt, but they're not dying at the scene, or you don't need, there's not an immediate life safety concern, as well as some of the near miss incidents. There's reporting forms at the Guide for Safe Scouting website, and those need to be completed and submitted, as well as notify the Scout executive. Youth protection membership infraction, and this is anything that's a violation of youth protection, violation of policies, suspected abuse, inappropriate behavior involving scouts, scout leaders, parents, some Venn diagram of those people. There is a form to do that, as well as notify the Scout executive. Also, and this spells out more cleanly what your obligations, your reporting obligations, or when those are triggered. Scout executive and the Scouts First helpline. Now, I took the liberty of altering the official guidance says the Scout executive, or if not the Scout executive, then go to the Scouts First helpline. And I would make the argument that you should do both. Even if you report something to a Scout executive, still fulfill the reporting either through the helpline or the email portal of the helpline. And I base that on, for those that aren't aware, my background's law enforcement, but there's also a lot of, if it was, so I'm big on documentation. If it wasn't written down, it didn't happen. So you say, oh, well, we suspected for years and years that, James Q. Scoutmaster was doing something inappropriate, but nobody ever wrote it down. I look at, if anybody has ever troubled themselves to look at the files that the national office released following the settlement, is some of it I looked and say, okay, well, it looks to me like action was taken. But it's obviously what's not there, what we don't know, the action that wasn't taken, that is what's now held against the organization and now hurts the organization. And I really like this. This is verbatim from the Guide to Safe Scouting. All incidents within the council must be reported promptly according to updated BSA incident reporting expectations. No incident is considered reported too late. And I think that was a big aha moment for me, that even if, and I'll put Brady on the spot, was my injury at Eagle Cave a year ago reported to the council, my broken ankle?
It depends who you reported it to.
Okay,
I mean, that's not the right way to say that. I wouldn't know unless you reported it to me.
okay,
The way our reporting system works, whoever you report to first usually is the lead on that and
okay,
has to input it, and then no one else in the council knows. Unless it
okay,
is a major incident, youth protection violation, that sort of stuff, in which case you call me, you say this happened, I call the scout executive. Obviously, then two people know. But
okay.
yes.
And that, I think, maybe underscores the point I made a couple slides ago about you doing reporting through the official channels and the scout executive. And part of it, remember, if you reported that, Rob Wilkinson is passing out cigars to Cub Scouts, um, you might not necessarily see some output of that. And I think that's one thing that's important to remember, that just because you don't see anything doesn't mean the report wasn't received and acted upon. That said, this is an organization of humans, and humans have shortcomings. And so if you've made those two reports to a Scout executive and through channels, then I think you can be reasonably assured that your report was received and will be acted on, even if there's no outward evidence of that. And so, again, you have to report it. No report is too late. Timely reports would be appreciated. And why do you report these? We're going to strengthen the safety culture of the BSA. And I think, I haven't been an avid reader of national literature and sort of the policy positions of Scouting America over the years, but I do see that safety culture is in organizations become good at things that are important to their leaders. I think this is something that is now becoming important to our leaders. Whether we can just, how we got to where we're at is a whole nother question, but we're here. And the BSA is taking Scouting America is taking safety seriously. Obviously, the reporting is going to raise awareness of potential risks, prompt the preventative action, and can drive improvement by highlighting if there's systematic issues, and refining policies. If something's not working and people are getting hurt, then we'll make adjustments. Well, I say we, Scouting writ large, but and then near misses that have some lessons learned. If a scouter is driving at 45 miles an hour through camp, I don't know that there's a profound lesson to be learned there. We're going to report and say, okay, well, maybe James Q. Scouter doesn't get to drive at camp anymore. We don't need, the road's fine. The road as engineered is fine. The car as engineered is fine. He just needs to obey the rule. So we document near misses because there's opportunities for improvement. Throughout this, you're being, this is just an extension of the Scout motto, be prepared. It's not just having your stuff, your knife, matches, rain gear. We're checking conditions beforehand, anticipating risks, and mitigating them. And this is from Lord Baden-Powell himself. The medium miles of Scout must prepare themselves by previous thinking out and practicing how to act on any accident or emergency so that the Scout is never taken by surprise. There's my phone number. Does anybody have any questions about safe Scouting resources? I think that's a no.
Rob, I want to say thank you, and thank you for talking about reputational risk. That is a great comment that you made. And if I can editorialize for a second, I worked for several years at a scout camp that had the highest rate of near misses in the country. Um, and that was because of one particular low cope element, where repeatedly youth that were supposed to be attached to a line for this low cope element were not. And we actually had a national safety management team come down and redesign that element. Not because we expected that someone falling off of the 6 foot thing could be catastrophic to the organization, but because we were hearing from feedback forums that it was concerning the parents and the teachers that were coming out and bringing their kids out to our camp. They were saying, well, we heard that Billy Bob unclipped himself from his safety system well in the middle of an activity. So it might not have ended up with a catastrophic medical emergency, but it would have ended up catastrophically affecting what people thought about that camp and for further purposes scouting. So thank you so much for bringing that up. And yeah, thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I think that dovetails a sort of what the point I want to make here is this isn't, here's a list of rules, know and follow the rules for the rules' sake, but the rationale for that. And we're not doing this because we are an organization of people who gravitate towards rules and like to enforce rules, but constantly ask yourself, is this advancing scouting, or does this place the mission of scouting at risk? And there's, well, I'll say, pardon my French, boys will be boys or kids will be ass. That's fine. Kids can be ass. Scouting's not the place for that. So anyway, yeah, this isn't about, here's all the things you must not do, but here's the things you need to avoid and why. So I hope that you feel like this was not a complete waste of your Thursday evening. All right, I'm going to try and turn the PowerPoint off here. Brady, you're still muted.
And then Ronda, you sent me your PowerPoint. Would you like to share or would you like me to share?
I think I'll share.
All right, wonderful.
Okay, and we'll see how I do this. Why it's saying unknown, but we'll just hit share and you tell me. Okay, you get to share because I did not enable my system settings privacy rules. And I would have had to reboot and all of that. Okay. Safety plan number 1, right? Be prepared. Okay. So yes, I'm Mrs. Marshall, as the scouts know me. Ronda Marshall, that I'll say was Scoutmaster of Girl Troop 82, but we are now a combined pilot troop. So I am Assistant Scoutmaster of Troop 82. We're continuing to function with the scouting with the girls and the boys all together, and Brady had said, let this be tips and trick about, troop camping, and more in particular because you have girls camping with you. And I struggled a little bit about what to put in there because I tend to say the girls just want the same opportunities that the boys do. So I wrote my presentation about how we do and what I see as valuable about our weekend trip and camping activities that we hold pretty much on a monthly basis. So with that little prelude or whatever, I'll jump into, of course, nice segue into continuing talking about safety, but wanted to somewhat, I'll say, simplify instead of having to read through the somewhat seeming at times legalese of how BSA or Scouting America writes up the guidelines. I tend to simplify things, and so really the key three things I think about for safety when we're on a camping weekend is making sure you have the right adult supervision, that you have youth to be able to follow the buddy system when they can't be seen by the adults, and then how you set up a campsite. And really that's, I'll say is key when you have two genders in your campsite in particular, and help simplify that. Adult supervision is pretty straightforward. People know this. I guess there's sometimes the confusion that yes, each unit that is there needs two registered leaders from the unit. When we were not a combined pilot, we were required to have four registered leaders when we were camping. And one of them being female. I'd added in here that make sure for those units that are camping with the boys and girls together or whatever, consider the multiple registrations across the units, because then the girl unit had lots of the ASMs from the boy unit on it, and then you technically cover it. And also, when we just did a Webelos camp, we did multiple registrations into Pack 82 and Pack 83 because they didn't have the leaders available when we were camping, and then we were able to do the Webelos camp out following the new guidelines, and talked with those packs to make sure that they were okay. And of course, they're like, okay, this is how you get them there, just by us having to do the cross registration and multiple registration. Free of charge if people don't know it. One person can be registered in as many ever units as you feel like. Uh, then the buddy system, obviously, two youth of the same gender within 3 years apart. Or if you cannot do that, then you can go to what people have been referring to as a truddy system or whatever, where you have 3 youth and there can just be one single gender available, and making sure that it's still within 3 years of age for that. This then allows that you can go on a camp out with one boy or one girl at that outing, and just have 2 other scouts that are within that 3 years of age, and then they can be it. When talking with our unit, they kind of said, well, what is the best practice? And Mr. Fink and I like to say, well, the best practice is you go in a group. Who cares? You could have 5, 6 of you out. There isn't anything that says you need to be 2 or 3. So really, I think this is the oddball situation when you need to go to the restroom or something and go out with just one single person, that type of event. And then for camping, knowing that camping with the patrol sites, making sure that you keep that separation. Tent mates are 2 years of age, while, as I just said, the buddy system is 3 years of age. Keeping that tent mate, and separation between the patrols. We've had some outings when we've only had like 2 to 3 feet separation between our patrols, and it didn't go well. We've had our best outings and weekend camps when we've put, ideally, really, if you could, 20 feet between them, so that the patrols don't do the cross mingling and feel like, oh, I could just go sit over there and so forth. And having multiple genders, I bring this up because then it also saves on some of that safety. You don't have purple and blue mixing, pink and blue mixing, as because we don't want purple. Go on to the next slide then. And I think part of how I have witnessed over the 4 or 5-ish years that I've been doing this, that making sure that we have activities, things planned to help the scouts stay busy, ensures they stay out of trouble and not causing too much mischief. I call it, and you see under the program section, that's structured fun. and making sure that they're engaging games. I put down this challenging and competing between the scouts and the adults have usually been the ones that we've seen them have the best time at. And one in particular, shortly after we were back camping because of COVID, we were doing a dining fly competition. The first time throughout the morning, we were practicing knots and reinforcing the knots of how you'd set up the dining flies. We took a break. They went and cooked lunch, came back, and we were like, okay, who can put them up the fastest? And then they were, they choose teams. Sometimes it was boys against girls, and sometimes it was patrols against patrols. And then us adults decided to act a little cocky and see if they could beat us. And that's when they had the most fun. They're like, this is great. We're learning something, but also had a great time doing it and really loved the interaction. The other key things that I'd like to, well, we ensure happens on every one of our campouts is to do an interfaith service. So our Saturday evenings has a very short devotional message that is typically put together by our chaplain's aide. We do also have little brochures, and we have a devotional book that we tend to keep in our um, troop trailer, and then we can hand it to the chaplain aide, whoever it might be, and they figure something out at the last minute because that's how youth behave. And let them. It really kind of gives them. I've seen them enjoy this downtime, but being together and having some quiet time to just reflect on really simple messages and being with them. And then the very last thing is having a campfire program. Each patrol and the scouts making a skit, leading a song, and having a youth be the MC. This is taken sort of a life of its own as the scouts have seen it over the multiple years. The last campfire we did with the Webelos was just it went for like an hour and a half. The scouts didn't want to stop singing. They were just having a great time. One of the Webelos' parents said to me, "You got something special going on here when they want to just sing and have a great time with you." And the adults were all engaged with them too, doing it, which I think kind of, going on to the next page here, Brady, I'm jumping to that second bullet here, is watching and being engaged with the youth on our campouts. We have lots of great conversations around the campfire about what they've done in school, what sports are they in, things like that. And I've really kind of seen how the youth um, just appreciate knowing that they have other adults that care for them and that want to be part of it. And then I think it kind of grows naturally that when they see this with their adults, they don't really want to cause mischief on the campout because they know how much we're watching, and they want to be respectful to us because we care about them and being respectful to them. And like I said, sing along with them, be goofy. The youth have enjoy the fact that the adults can have fun with them and so forth. Now, the very top item there, we've only started recently, maybe the last year, diligently taking away the cell phones. We used to only do it when at the week-long summer camps, and then we had enough feedback from the youth that they liked not having that temptation. And the SPL now takes the phones, and we had to start because we had some of our brand new scouts that had watches with data plans that we discovered were reaching out to their parents during their first couple weekends and wanted to go home, and was doing that call home to mom, come pick me up, just because they have the watch that they can punch little buttons on. So if you want to be that way to be aware that that exists out there too, to take the phones. And as I said, they have now appreciated not having that. Some, like I wrote down here, we do have the SPL keeps his phone and probably an ASPL. So there's 2 or 3 adults that youth that have a phone, and we'll make them out. Sometimes they say they might have a recipe on their phone or something. Well, okay, when you're cooking, we'll bring it out to you, and that. And then I was remembering the last thing, third item here about youth driving. We've had this question come up recently, as we have older scouts, of course, that have driving lessons. Guide to Safe Scouting or whatever document will say you have to be 18 or older in order to drive to a BSA event to be covered by the insurance purposes. So that gets a little tricky. We do it with Troop 82, just allowing you to go to Game Haven because it's close enough. But a couple weekends ago, we went to Whitewater State Park, and we had some of the older scouts that like, well, I gotta camp, I gotta go to work, and I'm like, you can't drive out. Your parents are gonna have to drive out, and so forth when it's a further distance away like that. So kind of decide how you want to also do that with the details of outings. The last item here was for games. There'll be some downtime, even though I said structured fun and program going on. Of course, have some downtime, whatever they want to do for playing around and what their favorite games are, or what the interests are of the youth. Go have something available that they can reach out to a game or something versus pick up their phone when sitting down for a few moments to be bored. Um, the last thing that I thought of while during the other presentation is we did, I'll say, have some heart-to-heart conversations with our scouts when we discovered the close relationships being formed between the boy troop and the girl troop, and settling down to be, essentially it was stated as, you have, you hang out with each other and you might have different rules when you're at home versus when you're in scouting. But, your parents are probably going to trust you that, the female scout can go and be with that single male scout out and go to a football game together, or come over to their house and all of that. And I'm like, that's fine, your parents make up those rules, but we do have the buddy system to keep that safe. And while we trust you, but in the end it still is necessary to keep following the buddy system when here in scouting, because your parents trust you, so it's fine, but there's others that are going to watch and see you around camp, question what's going on, and then that just looks negatively on you as well as our troop. And so keep an eye on that when there's the close relationships that we want to form between all of the youth, but then just kind of watching it. And really, I keep thinking that it goes back to being engaged and just being present enough that you notice what's happening around you. Don't, if you have the adults that come to the camp and they're not paying attention to what's happening because they're either on their phone or daydreaming about something, then we don't notice the little nuances of when the kids are going to go escape away and try and do something that they shouldn't. And so it is really just that kind of watchful eye from afar, that you are aware of what's happening around you. So that was what I had to cover, and hope that was helpful.
Thank you so much, Ronda. That was really wonderful. I really love you emphasize, and I've seen this with Troop 82 time and time again, that scouting doesn't end when you take off the uniform or come home from camp. that you're engaged and you're learning about your scouts and their lives and what they're doing, right? In a very holistic way. We're not a club or a movement. We're not an activity or lifestyle, as it were. So we want to learn about everything about our scouts, have those conversations. So I really appreciate you highlighting that.
And really, I mean, that's some of what I see as the big difference between having a youth involved in the scouting program versus a sports club. Is the sports and the coach I mean, they give them good advice in all of that, but it is for an hour here or an hour and a half here, and they send them home. We see the scouts for almost 48 hours straight on a weekend, and you really get to know them on a different level during, as I'm sure other people can relate to, when you're there and together for that amount of time.
Well, thank you. Do we have any questions for the Q&A portion? I will give it about 32 seconds here if you have a question to type it in. And hearing none, thank you everyone so much for joining us. I hope everyone has a safe and wonderful holiday season. And if you're traveling, oh, look at that. Chris says great presentation. Well, thank you for joining us, Chris. Thank you again to Ronda and Rob. Make sure to give them a high five or thank them in person next time you see them. And we will see you in the new year.
Thanks. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you. We'll see you.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.